See, you lost it, Dave. You lost the beat.
No, that was good. I did. That was really good.
I was tapping my foot the whole way. I did lose it a little bit when you guys are delayed and start counting with me.
Yes.
Because it's not in perfect sync for audio, so I fall in. But
it's not going to be without Shane, you know.
It's fine.
Yeah,
but that's his job.
I'm the one who played in the rhythm section for years.
Yeah, Shane's more of like a whiplash guy.
It's just like not my tempo, you know.
Mm-hmm. Should we start the episode with a quick "What's in your mouth"?
No.
Today I'm enjoying a Celsius sparkling Fuji apple pear.
Oh, perfect. I have a Northwind Imperial Stout.
Poland Springs.
In a water bottle, no less.
He goes directly to the spring.
No, I buy it by the jug. It's cheaper.
Hello and welcome to episode 303 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav, here in Chicago, and with me on the line from the top 32 of the Standard Showcase in Hotlanta, USA, it's Devon O'Donnell, aka Doomwake.
Is that my new official location?
Wherever you play your last tournament, that's your new location.
Okay. So it'll be in Charlotte in a little bit. I'm back. It was a hell of a weekend. Long weekend. I'm still very tired.
Let's do one quick tease. Give me a one-word answer. What was your favorite sideboard card?
They all kind of sucked.
That's standard for you.
No, I mean, honest answer is probably the Wiltleaf Leeches that I got to board in. We'll get into that in a second, but
wow,
it's more of a joking answer.
Today I learned Wiltleaf Liege is back in standard.
I was like, is it in standard?
That's foundations for you.
Foundations, baby.
What? It is?
Yeah.
I opened so much Foundations, and I didn't open a single Wiltleaf Liege.
Well, I don't think it was in the main set. I think it was like that extra product.
Oh,
or like the box set or whatever. I think it was in that.
The toppers or maybe or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's in the beginner box. Who knows? Who cares? What's most important is the Godfather's also with us, Dave Harbarker. Hey, Dave.
We're back, baby.
We're back.
Full strength-ish. Full of strength for as strong as we can be now.
Now, David, did you like last week's bonus episode?
It was great, especially the part that I showed up for at the end.
What do you mean showed up at the end?
I showed up at the end and did the promos from the future for the end.
Those were cut from the future episodes we've been recording for the last month plus.
Stan, we got to go back.
You ruined the bit again. Now you ruined a week-old bit. The people believed.
I'm just not really a guy for kayfabe, so like I don't think
they really believed.
I don't think they did either.
I don't know. I believe.
All right. What are we doing on this show?
On this week's show, Devon tries to teach us how to be good at Magic yet again. Let's see if it finally sticks this time, because as it turns out, it appears to be the secret to success is just playing a whole new format in a whole new tournament series, which is standard at the Atlanta Spotlight. Devon's going to talk us through the deck he played, the decks he played against, his new arch nemesis Sunfall, and the friends we made along the way. First, let's housekeep. We have new patrons. We've got new patrons during our vacation. Shout outs this week go to Micah C., Michael X., Pleated Pants, and Nicholas R. Thank you all. If you'd like to join the Dive Down Nation, you can find us over at patreon.com/the Dive Down. And of course, shout out to our sponsor, Heavy Play. If you'd like to get yourself some Heavy Play, check out our promo code, the Dive Down 2024, gets you 10% off your first order with Heavy Play. And Mana Traders, the Dive Down 10. Is that what it is?
It is the Dive Down 10. That's our permanent code on Mana Traders now.
Permanent code.
TEN.
Spelled out, all one word, no numbers, just letters.
That's right. And now, that's it for housekeeping. We're just going to jump into talking about the first. Was this the first spotlight?
It was.
Or was there one last year? I thought this was they were starting 2025,
Yep,
right?
first ever one.
First ever. You went 9-0 on day one of the first Spotlight series ever, Devon.
It's kind of wild. When you say it like that, it is kind of wild, huh?
You're going to the record books.
Me and Nathan, I believe, was my round 10 opponent. Yeah,
They're going to say Devon helped bring GPs back to life.
it's
Nathan Stoyer was the other?
No. It was Nathan Andres, I believe was their last name.
Okay.
But yeah, wild experience. I ended up. I guess we can just kind of start with the trip, right? I left. I guess we can start week before. I did a lot of testing. Ended up deciding to play the Selesnya cage deck, which I know Dave wanted to talk about the composition of this.
Yes. What is this?
Okay, so it's a sort of standard, similar, like pretty simple concept where it's just elves, land or elves. We know what that card is. 3 drops, right? So 3 drops, ideally that also bring an additional body, right? So you 3 elves, 3 drops, and then make a bunch of tokens. You have Overlord of the Mistmoors to make tokens, Sandstorm Salvager, which is Blade Splicer, Evangelist, things like that. And then Collector's Cage is kind of your big payoff, where Collector's Cage is the hideaway card, so it's hideaway 5. And then if you can put a counter on something, and if you have creatures with 3 different powers, you can play the card for free. So ideally, you would want to hit Overlord, because in that situation, play the Overlord for free, you get the bodies, and you get the 6/6. But the way that it plays out, it's like sort of ostensibly a beatdown deck, where you're just trying to curve out, attack for a bunch of damage. But it also kind of has this ability to grind through a lot of spot removal, because all of the cards sort of replace themselves, right? They all come with an additional body. In the case of Sanguine Evangelist, you get another body when that dies. So it kind of has this ability to like be aggressive, but also have a bunch of like sort of built-in card advantage.
Yeah, and it is a ton of cards that bring in extra bodies, as Devon is saying. So Paw Patch Recruit from Bloom Burrows, Sandstorm Salvager, Sanguine Evangelist, Seraphic Steed. Oh no, that one does not bring in extra bodies. Sorry. And Toby, Beastie Befriender, all bring in extra bodies. So it's a lot of cards in here that are sort of your like a 1/1. They're like Blade Splicers. It's like this is like deck of Blade Splicers kind of.
Where did this deck come from? Because from looking at Goldfish, like it doesn't seem to be on the metagame snapshot for the top decks. Is this a brew? Is this something that's been popping up?
I'm trying to remember. I believe the first person I saw playing it on Magic Online was Ms. Lizzle or Ms. Lizzie, who I believe I know she has a Twitter account. That's kind of where I saw it, and she tweeted about it. I saw her tweet, and this was maybe like a month and a half ago. And I've been working on the deck really ever since. I've been working on this deck for a while and tweaking a lot of the numbers, and I guess all that hard work paid off in the long run.
You tweaked well, bruh.
Yeah. But one thing I will mention, Dave brought up a 2-drop here, Seraphic Steed. Most of the quote-unquote stock lists have they're playing a card called Sky Knight Squire, which is a Foundations card, 2-mana 1/1 creature. Whenever another creature ETBs, you put a counter on it. If it has 3 counters or more, it has flying.
Yeah, that's a sick card. I've played it with in Limited a bunch of times. It's
good in Limited.
Very good in Draft. Yeah.
But the thing is, I tried that card out, and it just, I don't know. It's very good. It has a very high ceiling, but it's also a, as you can imagine, a really bad top deck later in the game. It's not a great cage hit. So I wanted to find 2 drops to sort of replace that with.
Yeah, it looks like it's a card that people think would go well with Collector's Cage, because that's another way to put a token onto it to make it into a flyer faster.
Yeah.
But it probably turns into a flyer pretty quick. And like you said, it's not that great later on.
Yep. Yeah, and so I decided to play two Seraphic Steed and 2 Malira the Living Cure. The text boxes on these don't really matter a ton. Malira is just a 2-mana 3/3, doesn't die to cut down, and Seraphic Steed is 2/2 first strike lifelink. Sometimes you settle it. I think I settled it once in 15 rounds, and it died before I even attacked. But the body's good against red. The last thing that I want to mention that we haven't talked about is those 2 copies of Wiltleaf Liege in the main deck. Now, we had mentioned earlier, Wiltleaf Liege being in Standard and Foundations. You might ask yourself, why are you playing this in the main deck? I mean, green-white creature deck, right? It's not bad. 4 mana 4/4, pump your whole team. Well, there is one of the more popular decks in Standard features 4 copies. It's the Esper Pixie deck, and that deck features 4 copies of Hopeless Nightmare. And you can imagine if your opponent casts Hopeless Nightmare and you discard a Wiltleaf Liege, they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I played 2 Liege in the main and 2 in the sideboard, because I really wanted to be prepared for Pixie, which I played 4 times and I beat all 4 of them.
Wow.
So
Sick. That looked like that was one of the best decks on the weekend, right? It had one of the highest conversion rates.
it was.
And I think it had one of the higher win rates coming in from what I could tell when I was glancing at the standard meta. I don't know a ton about it, but
Yeah, I think that was, and basically all of my Pixie opponents were like, yeah, this matchup seems horrendous for me. So they all sort of agreed with that. But yeah, that was the deck list. Going to Atlanta, I kind of traveled by myself, but I ended up finding a local who happened to be in the same flight as me. And so, we got to Atlanta. It was, I will say, just kind of walking into the event, it felt pretty surreal because, I've been to RCs and things like that. But as far as an open event is concerned, it's like there really hasn't been an open tournament this large in God knows how long. And it's, it does kind of feel like GPs are back, which I like.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it was awesome. As far as the event itself, we can kind of go into details there. So as far as kind of a round by round, first round played against Gruul Prowess. Not the most, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a ton about these games. I do remember my opponent getting horrendously mana flooded in game 2, and I drew Sheltered by Ghosts in game 1, and that card's good against red.
Yep.
It's a good one. Round 2 played against Sultai Terror. So for maybe you guys and folks at home that don't know, this is like Beanstalk combining with the 8-pack of Tolarian Terror and Eddymer Crab, which is kind of the new Tolarian Terror. A bunch of self-mill like Cash Grab, Seed of Hope, things like that. A bunch of cheap spells. So ended up losing game 1 because they had it was like a really close kind of back and forth game, and game 1 I think they didn't have a Beanstalk, so they were like, the deck is much better when it has Beanstalk, because when you're casting all of these crabs, you're cantripping and finding more stuff. But so they were like starting to run out of gas because they didn't have a Beanstalk, and they had 2 terrors and 2 crabs in play. So I was just like chump blocking all their 5/5s. But then I finally drew like something that let me stabilize. But then they ripped the 3rd crab off the top to tap both my blockers for lethal. So that was game 1. And then games 2 and 3, their draws weren't as good. My draws were quite good. I will say I ended up cutting my Rest in Pieces in the sideboard because I did not expect to play against this deck. Thankfully, I won the match anyway, so it didn't necessarily cost me, but didn't expect to play against a lot of graveyard decks.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Eddymer Crab before. I thought that this was the card that was like you could cast it from creatures being in the graveyard or something, but I didn't realize there was literally another big monster that has the reduced from instants and sorceries.
Yeah.
So yeah, eight of them.
Yeah, this one's double blue, so maybe a little bit harder to cast than Terror.
Yeah.
Round 3, I played against Mono Black Skeletons, which is certainly not a deck I had on my radar. They had some nice curve outs. They had a lot of you may not know what these cards are, but they had Forsaken Miner on 1, Case of the Stash Skeleton on 2, Corpses of the Lost on turn 3. So some pretty good curve outs. But yeah, turns out Sheltered by Ghosts good against aggressive decks. That's why I played it, and I drew Sheltered by Ghosts and I cast it, and that's really the whole match.
Draw Sheltered by Ghosts against aggro decks. It says here.
That is the note that I put there just to remind myself.
Yeah. Do it going forward.
Yeah. So round 4, this is when we get to a little bit of a bump in the road here. I played against Domain. And as you can probably take a look at this deck list, you're seeing a bunch of green and white cards and a bunch of creatures. And I don't know if you guys know this, but green and white creatures, not great against Sunfall. Not great. So these are the decks that I wanted to avoid. Game 1, I won the die roll. My hand was like basically perfect. I had turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Blade Splicer, turn 3 Overlord, and I think I killed my opponent before they even played their 5th land. So if you win the die roll and you have those draws, then who cares about Sunfall? Game 2, Kept a bit of a slower hand that had Aven Interrupter. This was kind of my plan against Domain, is to combine. I had 3 Aven Interrupter and 3 copies of Invasion of Gobakon Interrupter to kind of tempo them out a little bit when they tap out for the Sunfall. Gobakon to hit it before they cast it. Kept a bit of a slower hand. Didn't pan out. And then game 3, I had one of my best draws of the tournament where I went turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Blade Splicer, turn 3, I played double Invasion of Gobakon. I think I took 2 sweepers, and then, so both of his sweepers cost more mana. Then I flipped the invasion, pumped my team, flipped the second invasion next turn, and I mean, it was just kind of smooth sailing from there. So, this is how you beat Domain with this deck. It's certainly a matchup that you don't want to face, but if you kind of just win the die roll and have the nuts, I mean, that's kind of just magic, right?
Yes. All right. So you're 4-0 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, when you're playing a tournament this big, in your opinion, like the first few rounds can be kind of a crapshoot, but as you start to be 4-0, are you starting to feel like, okay, I'm at the top tables. I know I'm going to start seeing quote unquote better opponents and better decks. Or like, what are you thinking about as you get this far into day one? Or are you just not even thinking and you're just like, I'm just going to take it a round at a time?
I don't think about that stuff. You just got to take it a round at a time. You can't be worrying about things out of your control, you know? Like, when you get the pairings, what you can control is how you play in the game, you know? But you can't necessarily compare. You can't, like, you know, who you're going to play against and what decks you're going to play against. Like, you know, it's just kind of, it just falls the way it falls, right?
Yeah.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been 4-0, so curious. Good to know.
Come on, you've been 4 in a league before, right?
Yeah. Sure. I have day 2 to GP before, so.
So yeah, as Dave said, 4-0 at this point. Round 5, I had my first feature match, but it was an off-camera one, which to be fair to my opponent is probably for the better. Played against Esper Pixie, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a ton about these games, but we didn't. There was no. I will say there was no Hopeless Nightmare Will Leaf Leech yet. We'll get to that. So, but yeah, I mean, like they just didn't have an aggressive enough draw. Game 2, just sort of similar thing. Overlord, by the way, phenomenal against them because they don't have a ton of ground creatures, but they have a lot of flyers like Pixie and Fear of Isolation. So being able to gum up the air with Overlord tokens that you can also pump with Cage to trade for, you know, other things is pretty huge. So
yeah. The Pixie deck is a little weird. Like, just so people know, isn't that, what's that card called? What's the Pixie called?
Nurturing Pixie.
Nurturing Pixie. And it gets +1/+1 when a permanent leaves the battlefield or something.
So it's 1/1 for 1 flyer. When it ETBs, you return up to one other target non-land permanent to your hand that you control.
Non-fairy.
Yeah, non-fairy, non-land that you control. If a permanent's returned this way, you get a counter on it.
Right. So people are just making 2/2 flyers for 1 basically, and then getting synergy off the pickups, and that's why this deck is popular, kind of. Or
yeah, when you look at it, it like doesn't necessarily scream out to you as an aggressive deck, but specifically Hopeless Nightmare. Every single time they're recasting that, they're losing an additional 2 life. So they go like Nightmare on 1, Pixie replay Nightmare on 2, Fear of Isolation replay Nightmare on 3. That's already 6 damage plus the 4 that you took from the flyers. You're already at 10 life before turn 4.
Right. Plus 3 cards.
Yes.
2.
Yeah, we can't forget about that.
2 of which sort of didn't cost them, only cost them tempo, not cards, right?
Right.
So
yeah. No, that deck is crazy good.
Yeah. So you're playing it 3 out of these next 4 rounds, including the one you just described. So I thought it might be good for us to talk for a second about how that deck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I tend to forget that a lot of our listeners maybe not as focused on standard because I've been playing a ton of standard. So this is just kind of like a second nature to me. So that's a good idea.
So round 6, another matchup against Pixie.
Yeah, round 6, another matchup against Pixie and another clean 2-0. Now these games were a little bit closer. Like their game 1 kind of as good as you could be. They had turn 1 not Scavenger's Talent, Storm Chaser's Talent. Turn 2 Nurturing Pixie, pick up the talent, replay it. Turn 3 Fear of Isolation, pick up the talent, replay it. So, you know, that a pretty good start. But, you know, just like the combination of like Blade Splicer into Overlord to make a bunch of bodies to help block. And Yeah, I think in game 2, I'm pretty sure there was a spot where I was a little bit farther behind, but then I drew split up and then I was no longer farther behind. So something like that. So that was
though.
round 6. Yeah, just Pixie 2020. Round 7 was another off-camera feature match against Rakdos Aggro, Isaac Bullwinkle, who, if you know the name, it's Bullwinkle and some numbers on Magic
Yes.
Online. I'm sure you guys know that name. That's who that is. So Isaac's deck was really sick. Now, I will say, when I had my off-camera feature match, he was next to me playing an on-camera feature match, and I was focusing on my match. I didn't spend a ton looking at what he was playing, but I looked over for a very brief moment, and I noticed he had a Manifold Mouse in play, and I was like, okay, he's playing the red aggro mice deck, and because we didn't have open deck list yet. This is closed deck list day 1, open deck list day 2.
Oh, that's interesting. Didn't realize that.
Yep. So we're sitting down to play, and I look at my opening hand. It's got 2 Sheltered by Ghosts, and I'm like, oh, he's playing mono red. I got 2 Sheltered by Ghosts. This is fine. And then he goes, turn 1, Restless Vents. Turn 2, Go for the Throw of my creature. Turn 3, Preacher of the Schism. And I'm like, what?
And then he goes, Sorin, Vein Ripper.
No, not anything like that. But so what he was playing, and I think this was a brilliant deck choice, by the way. Isaac's deck looked sick. But he basically took the red aggro package and just added the good black cards. So you get the full aggression of Manifold Mouse, Heartfire Hero, Monstrous Rage, and Emberheart Challenger, but then you're backing that up with Go for the Throw, Preacher, Shieldred. So it's like he can attack from so many different angles. And one thing I'll mention about his deck, it was really hard to sideboard against, because I want to keep in Sheltered by Ghost against his red cards, but Sheltered by Ghost is not good against his black cards because it's bad against Go for the Throat, and it just trades for Preacher and Shieldred. So it was really hard to sideboard for that match. Got him in a really 3 close games. In game 3 was like there was so much math that was involved with both of us, where like he had 2 maps in play. He was trying to figure out what spells he could hit. Just a lot of math involved. So really sick match. So that was the another off-camera feature. Round 8, this was the first on-camera feature match. And boy, I will tell you, it was a good one to have on camera. So we mentioned Wiltleaf Leech earlier, and we mentioned this card called Hopeless Nightmare. Well, my opponent had turn 1, tap land, turn 2, double Scavenger. My first couple of turns was Elf into kick Paw Patch into turn 3 Overlord, which pretty good draw on my end. Yeah. And then on his third turn, he tanks for a little bit, decides to tap a black mana, put the Hopeless Nightmare face up on the table, and like as he does it, he like looks up at me and gives me a little smirk, and then I just like slide the Leech right into play, and it was a pretty good on camera moment.
What do you think the smirk meant? Like,
well, he knew.
Even
though it was closed deck list, I posted my deck list on Twitter the day before.
Right.
I didn't care,
Yeah, either he knew or he was like, let's see if he really has this tech, basically.
Yeah. No, because that was a card that was picking up in popularity over the past couple of days. Not even Wiltleaf Leech, but Obstinate Bailoff is also legal, so people are playing that too.
Oh, geez, I forgot about that card.
I literally had no idea.
It's an uncommon, isn't it?
Yeah, and bro. So yeah, that was that match. Funny enough, I will say, I got so excited about putting the Wiltleaf Leech into play. That same turn, he cast Sheltered by Ghost to kill my Wiltleaf Leech, and I forgot my Paw Patch triggers.
Oops, Devon, you can't be doing that.
I still won that game. To be fair, there was a spot where it was a really tense game. He was like loading up a bunch of counters on this giant Lifelinger, but I had Malira, which not a super relevant text, but it has the ability to sack itself to like save a creature. But I can get to a spot where if he ever attacks me with the big Lifelinker, I can just block with Malira and sack it to make it so he doesn't gain life. So he can't really ever attack. And then he eventually tried to like nowhere to run my Malira, which is supposed to be a 3/3, but there was another Legion play, so it was actually a 5/5. So I guess we're even on punts at that point.
Yeah.
That was game 1. Game 2, again, it was all on camera, so you can go back and watch it. It was a pretty fun match. And then round 9 played against Gruul Prowess. Now, this is a funny story. So remember the person that I told you that I wasn't planning on flying with anybody, but I found a local who was, also happened to be on the same flight as me, right? So we get an Uber, like when we get to the Atlanta airport, we get an Uber back to the hotel because he was staying not too far from me. And our Uber driver asks us, like, what are you in town for? And we say, oh, we're here to play a card tournament, and, about 1,500 people. And she asked us if we were going to play each other. And we were like, well, there's 1,500 people. Surely that wouldn't happen, right? And here we are playing for 9-0 on day one.
Oh
Always happens. Always happens.
Just surreal moment. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Hey, at least it was a 9-0 instead of the first round or whatever.
Yeah, that is true. Because he still was 8-1. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
The Gruul matchup. I mean, these games against Gruul can get really tough. Same thing against the Rakdos aggro player I played against. It's just there's so much math involved where you're trying to figure out, like, you have to do a lot of playing multiple turns in advance of, like, okay, I'm going to attack here. This is how this block's going to go. This is how their attack's going to go. Then I'm going to have lists left over. There's a lot of math involved. So 3 really close games. Game 3, though, this is the highlight for me. Game 3, it was like we were both kind of staring at each other for a little bit. He had a Screaming Nemesis. I couldn't really attack into that because that makes attacks really hard. I eventually drew a cage, right? And I Collector's Caged into Split Up, right? Split Up is the destroy all untapped creatures or destroy all tapped creatures. The thing about Collector's Cage is you can do it at instant speed. So I then went to my attack step, tapped all of my creatures sideways before blocks, activate Cage, split up untapped creatures.
Wow. So you plague winded him.
Yes.
With Split Up. Well done.
It's nice. Stan has this look of shock and awe on his face.
That's just like the type of heads up play that gets you an undefeated day one in a tournament. Like to have the mental clarity to find those lines is like, it's impressive in and of itself, but that you were able to do it at 9 p.m., if not later.
It was actually kind of early. We left the building at like 7:30 for 9 rounds, which was insane. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. So you won.
I did.
9-0.
Yeah, won that match. 9-0. Undefeated day one.
What did you eat after that?
We went to a place. I actually went with Spike. We went to a place called Mr. Fries Man. It was just like a garbage fries place.
All right.
And I got like fries. It was like barbecue chicken ranch bacon fries.
Whoa.
It was amazing.
I'm sure that was really good for the brain.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the heart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Better for the brain, of course.
I was kind of hoping you would say, like, yeah, we went to this place called like Mr. Frogs. And I was like, are you in Cancun?
Mr. Frog's Bar. Well, that's great. You and Spike got to grab dinner. All right. So you're 9-0. Mm-hmm. You're like, I got to get some rest.
Yep.
All right.
Were you able to sleep?
I was. I actually had a good night's sleep.
Love that.
I'll tell you, the one time that I did make day 2 of a Grand Prix, I could not sleep the night before, Stan, since you mentioned it.
Before day 2.
The night before day 2. Yeah, like after day 1, I made it, because I made it in at 7-2, and I was 1-2 to start the day. So I climbed up the back end. And I remember playing the last match and was just totally freaking out. And then I got back to the hotel and tried to go to sleep. And I was like, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I was up like all night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good for you for getting some rest through the adrenaline.
Yeah, a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So round 10, there was only 2 undefeateds. So I actually knew the night before who I was playing and what deck I was playing against, because they posted the 2 undefeated deck lists. And lo and behold, another Sunfall deck, my nemesis.
Yeah.
And this was arguably a worse matchup for me. This is mono white tokens as opposed to domain. And the reason I think it's a worse matchup is they have stuff that they can actually play to the battlefield on turn 3 and 4, like Enduring Innocence and Beza. So what happens in that matchup is if they have a curve of like Innocence into Beza, you kind of feel like obligated to committing more to the board because you need to have a better battlefield to be able to attack past those kinds of cards. And as you commit more, then they Sunfall you. And they don't really care that they're losing their own creatures because all of their things replace themselves. Beza draws a card, Innocence draws multiple cards. So it just they can lose every creature they have and it just doesn't matter, right? So abysmal matchup. This is the on-camera day 2 match. Game 1, my opponent resolved 3 copies of Sunfall.
Oh my gosh, 3?
And I somehow won that game.
Oh,
I could not. I went back and watched the match, and I still don't know how I won that game.
Amazing.
So that was sweet. I think what happened there is, like, remember how I was saying, like, the innocence into Beza and then make me commit more? He never had that stuff. So he was doing nothing up until the point where he was casting Sunfall. And I was able to, like, pace my threats in a much better way than being forced to commit more to the board to beat something like a Beza or an Innocence.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, sometimes when you're playing the Wrath deck, you just draw Wraths. Right. And you think maybe it's going to help you hold on, but it's kind of like Blood Moon, right? Where it's like you have to have a recovery plan that's going to be better than your opponent's recovery plan or whatever. You need a clock basically in order to take advantage of it in most things, because otherwise they'll just recover and still kill you.
Right. Yeah, and I will say, if all they have is Wraths, this deck is surprisingly good at fighting through only Wraths, right? Mm-hmm. You have, again, as Dave mentioned earlier, all those cards that make multiple bodies. Like, those cards are very good against Wraths.
Right.
But games 2 and 3, he did have those cards. I think both games 2 and 3, he went turn 3 Innocence, turn 4 Beza. And it's just like, you can go back and watch the camera matches. It's so hard to slog through that stuff, while also making sure that you have to, like, try to keep stuff in hand for when they Sunfall you. It's just, it's a lot to slog through. So I ended up losing that match. So 9-1 now. And then round 11, played against Esper Pixie, which I think probably this might be my favorite match of the weekend. Even though I don't have any, like, specific details and like memories about the match itself, we went to time, and all 3 of the games were just the most complicated games that you could possibly imagine. There was one spot where he had a temp lockdown that had 2 Pixies, 2 Storm Chaser's Talents, and I think like he had like 6 of his own things under a temp lockdown, and I had to, like, play around him going, like, end of turn, bounce his own lockdown with this town ain't big enough to get all this stuff back, and, like, what that would do to the battlefield. It was just, like, the most complicated game that I've ever played in my life. And yeah, I was able to barely get that match in time due to, I think game 3, I had the 3rd Overlord, which is, you know, he was able to fight through the first 2, but the 3rd one was too much for him. So that was an insane match.
There you go.
So 10-1 now. Round 12, I played against Blue Eye Convoke, which is, they call it Convoke, but it's not really Convoke. It's more of like, you know, blue-white small creatures with, like, Bunicorn and stuff like that. I feel like it's a bad matchup. I looked at the deck on paper. I hadn't really played against this deck a lot during testing, really at all. So, lost a pretty quick 2 games. Unfortunately, didn't draw Shelter by Ghost in either game. Kind of just got ran over. That's all right. So 10-2 now, and I'm basically at the point where there's 3 rounds left, and I have to win the next 2. So if I get the 12-2, I can draw the last round. So no losses to give at this point.
What does winning the next 2 rounds net you?
I can draw in the top 8.
Ah, okay.
So 12-2-1 would lock for top 8. And lo and behold, round 13, another on-camera feature match, another Sunfall deck. They're very, very good at putting me on camera against Sunfall. I don't, you know, that's just the way it lined up, I guess.
But in this case, since it's open deck lists, does that should benefit you somewhat to, like, either play around it or inform maybe your keeper mulls, or is it just kind of like they either have it or they don't?
Well, it was actually kind of strange in this particular individual's case. This opponent I think she had her split up. Let me see if I can pull up her deck list. She had a weird Wrath split, and I want to say, because her name was Great Pain. She actually made top 8. Maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert. She had 2 Sunfall, 1 Day of Judgment, 1 split up main deck, and then 2 split up in the board. So she had, like, different Wraths, and it's actually a lot harder to play around that kind of stuff in open deck lists, because if it's just 4 Sunfall, you don't have to worry about a 3-mana sweeper. You don't have to worry about a 4-mana sweeper. But when there's a split of Sunfall, one Day of Judgment, one split up, now you have to always think about that in your head. So I would actually say that her deck list was harder to play against an open deck list than most other domain decks. Yeah, so on camera, I mean, it was a really close 3-game match. There was some spots that were very interesting. I actually ended up, I don't want to go too much into detail because I went over it today on stream as far as like the plays that I maybe could have done differently. There was one spot where I had a read that she had Sunfall, so when she went to get lost my Restless Prairie, instead of attacking for 4 with Malira, I sacked it to save the Prairie to play her on Sunfall, which she didn't end up having, but she had Zur to animate Overlord, and then I died very easily. Then game 3, there was a line where I like Aven Interrupted and Overlord, which is normally not a good idea. Because for those of you who don't know, if you plot the Overlord, they can just cast it, the 6/6 half for free.
Right, it's a creature.
2 mana. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did that because I had a second Aven, and I was like, okay, well, I can Aven this turn, Aven next turn, and kind of just tempo her out a little bit. But I ended up drawing an invasion, and for some reason, I decided to cast that instead of holding up Aven. And I don't really know why I did that. I just like tunnel vision myself. So tough loss. But 10-3, still live for top 16, top 32. Still feeling great. Like I said, I got pretty lucky on day 1 to only play against one Sunfall deck, and 2 of my 3 losses today being Sunfall. Kind of expected that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't dodge the bullet forever. Round 14, Gruul Prowess. I don't remember a ton about this matchup. I do remember me steamrolling game 1, just like perfect curve, sheltered by ghosts, and then games 2 and 3, I multi 5. So that's all I remember about that.
And you won off those mulls, I'm sure.
No. So 10-4 now. Good breakers, so can still win in top 32. And then round 15, I played against Demir, Demir opponent. So, we both got good breakers playing for top 32. And I will say it was a very entertaining match. She was very good at bluffing. There was a spot where I animated a Restless Prairie, and she had I think 2 cards in hand, and she sat there and tanked for 10 seconds. And I kid you not, I wrote down on my notepad the word Tidebinder, because I was like, oh, she has Tidebinder, she's thinking about stifling my thing. And then the game goes on for 5-7 more turns or whatever, and I played the whole game around her having a Tidebinder, and then the game ends and she shows me her hand, it's just 2 lands, and I was like, you're really good at bluffing.
Yeah.
Well done.
So that was a really fun match. I did end up taking that in 3 pretty close games. Again, very entertaining match. She was a great opponent, and so crazy match to finish off an amazing tournament. 11-4, and I did sneak into top 32 at exactly 32nd place.
Oh, the best! What does that get you? A crate of Magic cards?
A cool $550 and a foil Terror of the Peaks promo.
Yo.
Yeah, the Terror of the Peaks promo is sick. Devon had it up on camera while you were away earlier, Stan. And
sorry, a 3-year-old walked in behind me.
Yeah, somebody's gonna love this card at some point.
That's hot.
Yeah,
there's only 128 of them, so.
And they're only at this spotlight,
right?
So they're starting to do more of these event only promos. Yep. So, Wizards can print their own money, so they are to help out. And as long as it's going out to the prizes, there you go. That's great. Helps the prizes.
Has that card been valued yet?
EDH. Oh, you're saying that specific version? Dealers offered me $250. I said no. There was a listing, actually 2 listings I saw on TCG that same night that were $1,000. So, and that's day 1, so they might even go up from there.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
So you paid for your trip and probably then some.
Yeah.
Assuming you don't keep the card.
And I will say,
Commander aficionado.
Of course.
Tempted.
I will say, I got to meet a lot of amazing people. There were a couple people that asked me about, when are we doing another Dive Down episode? So
no way.
If you guys are listening, here's that. Well, a couple people had asked me if I was going to do a tournament report. So there's that. Here you go.
Here it is.
Shout out to all the amazing people that I met. Thank you for all the support. It was a wild weekend. Wouldn't trade it for the world. And GPs are back.
That's awesome. Fantastic.
It only took 42 minutes to go through that tournament report.
I tried my best.
I'm glad you did. What did you feel was like the overall state and health of the standard format for this tournament? It sounds to me like you played against what, like 8 different decks?
Yeah, I played against Gruul 3 times, Pixie 4 times, Domain twice, and then I think everything else was a one of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of different decks. If you look at the metagame towards the top, I will say it is relatively Gruul heavy. There was 1, 2, 3 in top 8, and then 1, 2, 3. Looks like only 3 more in top 16. So that even like 6 out of the top 16 is not even that bad. But yeah, like Scott McNamara, who we did an episode with Ofa McNamara before, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah, we did.
That's who that is.
About Phoenix.
Yeah, he won the event.
Oh, he did?
Or sorry, he lost in the finals. I'm sorry, he lost in the finals to another Gruul player, Nicholas. Ton of diversity at the top tables. Like that, the Azorius Blue-White Convoke player that I lost to, they top 8'd. There wasn't a lot of that deck around. Yeah, Standard's awesome right now. I love Standard.
I mean, that sounds more diverse than Modern, like to some extent. Dare I say?
Yeah, let's talk about it a little more because, I have hinted that I've spent a lot of time on Arena lately, and I have a lot of wild cards, Devon. And I have most of Foundations at this point, I think, in play sets. Where would you start if you were going to start getting a Standard? I guess for me, I should just play Gruul Prowess. So that's probably an easy answer for me to dip my toe into. But what other decks do you think people should think about if they're going to start to dip their toe into Standard? If they want to get ready for RCs in the future, that kind of stuff. Like, how do we start getting into this format?
I mean, as far as the metagame is concerned, if you want to look at it as pillars, you have the red core, whether it's Gruul, Mono Red, Boros. There's sort of still some debate there. I think most people, assume that Gruul is the best. Then you have the mid-range stuff, which is kind of like Dimir or Golgari. Golgari is pretty bad, mostly Dimir. And then you kind of have the big ramp stuff, right? Like Domain, Mono White, things like that. I guess those decks are a little bit different, but they're both Sunfall decks. And then you kind of have these new sort of like pixie decks, right? Which I think a lot of people aren't even necessarily, people haven't even necessarily decided on what the best version of this pixie deck is, whether it's Esper or just blue-black. I actually think in the top 32, there was more blue-black enchantments than there was Esper. No, it looks like 3 Dimir, 4 Esper, something like that. I think it's 3 and 4, so it's pretty close either way. But yeah,
the Pixie's white, so don't you need to play that card, or is it just to go in a different direction?
So the Dimir versions, like Scott's, for example, I'll take Scott's list. Scott was kind of like Dimir mid. It's like a hybrid Dimir mid-range, but it's still playing the same blue and black cards from the Esper Pixie deck, like Storm Chaser's Talent, Hopeless Nightmare, This Town Ain't Big Enough, Fear of Isolation. But it's pairing that with more like bigger stuff, Kaido, Curiosity, Spyglass Siren. I think Scott's deck was phenomenal, by the way. I think Scott made a really good metagame call. But for people who are like just getting into Standard, I think I would recommend starting with either Gruul or like some sort of Dimir deck. I think those are probably like the two decks you want to learn the most, and can also gain the most by learning. Even if you don't want to play those decks, you gain a lot by learning how to play against those decks.
Mm-hmm. How about your deck? How do you feel about your choice after the tournament? So you played this deck, you went 11-4 with it. What do you think? You suit it up again, or where you at?
Oh, I would for sure. I mean, if I have another RCQ this season, I'm going to play this deck because I think that it is, for my money, I just think that this deck is doing the most powerful things. It has the ability to play an Overlord, like a 6/6 Overlord as early as turn 3. I only did that once in the tournament, to be fair, but I feel like for me, it has the highest ceiling and it also has a pretty low floor, right? A lot of your cards are just good value cards. You have like I said, all the token makers that replace themselves. You have the creature lands like Restless Prairie is fantastic. The one issue, we got to address the Sunfall in the room. you don't really have a good plan against that deck. Any deck that's playing Sunfall, your green-white deck doesn't really have a good plan against Wraths, specifically Sunfall, that is. I'm thinking about trying a new version that's like blue-white Cage that just, or maybe even Bant, just because I want to try and see if I can fit some counterspells in there. But, there's some things to try there. But yeah, I mean, I think the deck's fantastic. It's got a good matchup against Red and Gruul, or Red and Dimir, so can't be that bad.
Right. So that's a start.
Yeah.
Heroic Intervention isn't standard legal anymore?
So Sunfall Exiles is the real problem with Sunfall. So it's like, Invasion of Gobakhan is good and all, but it doesn't work against this.
Nothing does.
Yeah.
That's why do you think people hate Sunfall so much?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not that expensive to exile all creatures.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How much? So I haven't played against Sunfall a ton. So is it just absurd that it leaves them with like a 5/5 creature?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a game.
Well.
One of the games I played against one of the games that I lost on camera to Mono White. There was a spot where I had him at 6, right?
Right.
And I like made this big attack, forced him to cast the Sunfall, and then I had he was actually I think he went to 9, and then I Restless Prey put him to 6 the next turn. But the fact that he had a 6/6 like token after killing my board meant that I could attack him with my 3/3 land. It's like, do you really need to give him a 6/6 after wrathing the board? Like, come on.
Yeah, that card is wild.
It's messed up.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I find very interesting, which is 9 rounds. It started at 9 a.m., wrapped in under 12 hours. That sounds to me that 2 things. 1, that the event was run well, and 2, that none of the decks were like going to time egregiously. What are the slowest decks in the format right now? 1, because it sounds like if people are going to time, like it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's question 1. And 2 is like the fact that this is the first showcase. It's run by Wizards. It seemed to be run pretty smoothly. Is this like a good indication that Huey's department has figured out how to like do things better than, what we used to experience with DreamHack and, some of the other TOs that were a little bit more rough around the edges?
Well, I believe the event was run by Star City.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So
that's great because they're also running our RCs.
Yes.
This year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're running them all.
Yep. They're basically running everything at this point. I was very surprised because as I was noticing that each round was going about 15 minutes over. So, I mean, I guess if you do the math on that, right? 15-minute rounds, 15 to 20 minutes over each round, times 9, that's an extra 180 minutes. That's about an extra 3 hours. 9 rounds minus 90, 8.5, 7.5. Yeah, so it's about, 9 or 10 hours, which is roughly what it was, including the, like I said, 15 to 20 minutes over. But yeah, I guess there was no downtime there really wasn't a lot of downtime from when the last match got posted to the round getting paired. There wasn't like repairs or delays with pairings. As far as the slow decks in the room, I mean, it's all the Sunfall decks. Domain, Mono White, especially when you get like a Domain mirror match, those games just never end. But that's mostly it. There's no like Azorius control. Like you would think traditional control, like counter spells, card advantage sweepers. There's really none of that. It's just all Domain.
Did this event? So they announced the next 2 spotlights for Denver and Indy. Indy is modern. What's Denver?
Limited.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Isn't it? Yeah, limited GP.
Yeah, good thing Shane is nearby because I'm sure he's going to look forward to registering the cards of the person across the table from him.
I mean, I want to go to that.
Me too. I want to go to that.
We should go to both of them.
Sure.
Indy?
Yeah.
Indy's not too far from me. I could probably do both.
Well, Dave and I can drive to Indianapolis.
Well, I can't.
Yeah, Indy's 3 hours from Chicago.
And we will.
I can't drive Indy.
Did this experience, the spotlight in and of itself, make you more inclined to do more spotlights in the future?
Yes, for sure. With just how well it was run, the amount of people and interactions that I got to have, the amount of people that I met, like just, fans that came up and said hi to me, love the content and all that stuff. Like it was just, even just like getting to see people that I haven't seen in forever, like Ross and Jerry and all these people that, I used to go to every single Grand Prix, and that was awesome to see those people like they're interested in Magic again because of these open tournaments that are, they're just great. Just a really good environment.
That's great.
Yeah, I love it. Well, these return to GPs are great. I mean, it's been a long road to get back to some tournaments like this happening again, but it's nice to know that Wizards has realized that they're kind of essential to the competitive play ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So can't wait to see more. It gives us more to talk about, honestly, too. I mean, even if it's not always our formats, and it's extremely hard to do like a post-op on a limited GP.
For that reason, we won't.
For that reason, we won't. But
unless I win,
might play.
Yeah, unless Devon makes top 32, or Shane for that matter.
Yeah,
or Dave. It sounds like Dave can't wait to draft.
Or Stan.
No, I'm not going to play that. Cool. So you mentioned that if you have another RCQ, you will play this deck in Standard. Otherwise, are you about ready to shift to Modern prep for Charlotte?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm still going to on stream, as far as that is concerned, I'm probably still going to play like a little, mix in a little bit of Standard here and there. But yeah, full focus definitely on Charlotte at this point.
Cool. Yeah. Me too, man. I've started firing up the Modern leagues, both for the episode and for my own preparation with Boros.
Mm. Oh, that's where you're starting there?
Oh, I'm committed to Boros.
You are now?
I'd be crazy not to be. I don't know if you've noticed, but I think the last 4 or 5 Modern challenges have been won by Boros. All of the Sunday challenges were. I think all the weekend challenges were won by Boros.
Not enough to tempt you. Rhino's not enough to tempt you, huh?
No.
You let me down. Right. Well, I mean, I was going to play some Rhinos, but maybe I shouldn't now.
You are welcome to. I just, I was talking to Dave about this, about trying to figure out what are the reasonable goals that I should set for myself for this event after the time and pain went into qualifying for it. Cause I wasn't sure if I wanted to do any practice at all. The goal was always just to get here. And beyond that, I wasn't sure if it was prudent or realistic for me to try to set goals beyond that. And Dave confirmed something for me, which is I kind of owe to myself to put in some work and see what I can make out of this opportunity. And I feel like if I'm trying to make the best out of this opportunity, playing the deck that got me there is a good idea. Playing which appears to still be the best deck in the format, I think, or
probably
certainly top 2 or 3.
Certainly top tier. Yeah.
And yeah, I not only did it win the last few challenges, but there's this 175 that 3 people won 3 challenges in a row with the same 75. Between the 3 of them, they only had 3 losses. It was Boros is the deck, and so yeah, that's what I'll be working on. And on that note, I'm in New York City next week.
Yes,
and on Tuesday night, January the 14th, I think I'm going to play Modern at Bifrost Games. So if any New York listeners, New York City, are in Manhattan on Tuesday.
It's in Midtown, isn't it?
Yeah. Sure.
We'll go with that.
It is. No, it's on 27th Street, so it's south of there.
It's a big island. I can't keep track of all the neighborhoods. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm going to try to do Bifrost on the 14th as part of my paper practice.
I can't wait for people to write in and tell me that I misdefined what Midtown is in Manhattan. I'm sure I did. But
yes, I'm sure you did too. Okay. So there we go. We did it. We did a standard episode. Our first episode back from holiday. Our first official episode back from holiday.
Yeah.
Devon too strong. We can't not talk about your amazing performance. Congratulations again, going undefeated on day 1 of the first spotlight. That's really impressive. And
thank you.
I'm proud of you.
We promise we'll talk about Modern next week.
Yes. And we could do a tease, not only of next week, but the next 4 weeks. We're doing 4 weeks on 4 unbanned cards, starting with Faithless Looting ending on Splinter Twin.
Yeah, it might be less than 4 weeks, right? Because we're going to finish all this stuff before Portland. So I think it might actually turn out to be 3 weeks given the timing. So we'll have to chunk a couple of these cards together. But we do need to cover Stan and Devon's preparations, ending with Portland for now. And then we'll talk about, but we're going to focus it, like Stan said, around the banned cards individually to talk about what's happening with them, what's good with them. And then we'll kind of see, Stan's playing a deck without even any unbanned cards, and we'll see what kind of splash they look like they're making from here. But it seems like the most interesting thing.
Well, I think you could make the case that they unbanned Felia, Exuberant Shepherd, and Seasoned Pyromancer with the announcement.
We'll get into this more next week, but I think maybe Stan should be playing one of the cards that got unbanned in his deck.
Oh no. A cheeky one of Faithless Looting.
A cheeky one of Splinter Twin.
Okay, that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple or Spotify, leave us a rating and review. You can submit a question to us. We're on Blue Sky at the divedown.bluesky something. You can find us. Or just email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. Check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. We've got some sponsors, including Heavy Play. Use promo code TheDiveDown2024 to get 10% off your first order at heavyplay.com. ManaTraders.com sponsors us as well, and get 10% off your first 2 months of a ManaTrader subscription using promo code TheDiveDown10. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, see you at the next Spotlight.